In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. These words, whether they're right or if they're wrong, were spoken by our 34th President of the United States of America, Dwight D. Eisenhower. President Eisenhower wrote his speech in the hopes that we would see the threat of the military-industrial complex that our country had come to bear throughout the Cold War. In my mind, Eisenhower had one main purpose when he was giving his speech, and that was to warn the American people of his fear of the military-industrial complex. In this speech, I see three main areas of his fear: in government, in research, and in economy. In his first quote that I shared with you, I think it has some hidden meaning. He says, "In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence." So in the government, we need to protect against influence by the military, is what he's explicitly saying. And I see this as like him directly saying that the military has an effect on the government and therefore politics as a whole. Next, in research, he says, "The free university, historically the fountainhead for free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes a substitute for intellectual curiosity." He did this to tell people that the changes involved in research were coming from being for the people to being for the government. And instead of us researching for ourselves, the government researching for us. The price of this is our own innovation and the things that we want to see. Lastly, he says simply, "We annually spend on military security more than the net income of all United States corporations." With this, he showed people the purpose of his message, and more importantly, he showed them the price. Now I'm going to show you a short clip of his speech.
"In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together."
This video, which I just showed you, was broadcast from the Oval Office of the White House just 3 days before he would pass off being the presidency to John F. Kennedy. That was on the 17th of January, 1961. During his 2 terms in office, he oversaw a good portion of the Cold War, although it was not without incident. Perhaps the biggest controversy would be the U-2 spy plane incident, when an American spy plane was flying over the Soviet Union and it was shot down. Despite this, by the end of his presidency, people still saw him as a very popular president in our history. At the time, this speech was very significant because of the substantial spending on the military in the Cold War. In the mind of Eisenhower, the military held too much power, and he wrote this speech as a warning to the American people. And to many people, they still believed that he had a right to warn us. As of August 30th, 2025, the DoD budget is $841 billion. That's 14.7% of the federal budget. In 1961, the military budget was $40.6 billion, which is 50% of the federal budget at the time. To this day, and for the foreseeable future, this speech will serve as a warning to the American people that unless our budget changes dramatically, his speech will still hold significant relevance to our people. There are many reasons his speech was effective. Among them are these rhetorical devices. My favorite one, and the first one, is American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. This is a metaphor, as he doesn't actually mean swords in his speech. He actually means weapons, and he means that businesses can switch between making weapons and making goods. This is important because it's a trade-off in our government, and it's a trade-off between the military and our own well-being. The second is, we face a hostile ideology, global in scope, aesthetic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method. This is an example of parallelism, and it's important to his speech because it amplifies his message of the hostile ideology that he fears that our nation had come to forbear. The next thing he says is, we pray that people of all faiths, all races, and all nations may have their great human needs satisfied. Those now denied the opportunity shall come to enjoy it to the full, that all those who yearn for freedom may experience its few spiritual blessings, that all those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility, that all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made to disappear from the earth. This is an example of anatoplosis, as there are multiple sentences beginning the same way with that or those. And this is important because his ideology, in his own words, applied to people of all faiths, all races, in all nations, not just our own. Another good example is his persuasive devices, first being ethos. And he has strong ethos automatically because he's the President of the United States. But at the time, he actually held even more credibility than he does now. As to everybody who knew him then, they knew him as the commander in World War II of the Supreme Headquarters of Allied Expeditionary Force, or basically the commander above everybody who commanded the entire Allied forces during World War II. He said, "We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become an insolvent phantom of tomorrow." In this, he makes a logical appeal to the people. He tells us to listen to him, to remember what he says, and to think on what he said. He says to do these things if we believe in our democracy. He next says, we cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss of their political and spiritual heritage. He asks us to take his message to heart and to think about the risk of the loss of our values in our grandchildren. And I can't think of using our children or our grandchildren as any less of an emotional message than anything else he could have said. So, President Eisenhower wrote his speech in the hopes that people would see the threat of the military-industrial complex and that our country had come to bear throughout the Cold War. Thank you for listening to my speech.